All right, so guys, I'm recording just for the sake of me being able to make a synopsis for it tomorrow. This isn't like an official commission or committee or anything, but we will have the record. My plan for this evening is, in a second, I'm going to share, screen share the copies of the concept plans that Wayne sent over. I'm going to have Wayne and Grant just talk about what's there for a while, and then we have large scale copies of it here in the room so that people can make comments on sticky notes so we can stick them on the plan. But if anybody has comments they want me to add, I'll then take a snapshot at the end. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share screen now, and Wayne, you go ahead. Which one do you want to look at first, Wayne?
The one that's closer into the building, yeah, the main activity area.
Okay, so the other one. All right.
Yeah.
Hold on. Give me a second here. Okay. So what's in the chat here? Okay, Valerie wants to know how many are in town hall. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 plus me. We had a few more responses of people who may drift in. Boy, there's a lot of pizza here, but that's okay. More for everyone. Okay, take it away, Wayne.
Can we eat the pizza through Zoom?
As soon as I can figure that one out.
Who knows? You might end up with, a new business here. Zoom pizza. Okay. So I would assume that everybody can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So based on our assessment, which, by the way, the points that were brought up by a couple of people on the assessment, Grant and I updated it and we revised it. And I don't know if Tira, if you want to distribute that again. So we went through all the points and all the feedback, and anyway, you can send that out and people can take a look at it. Can you scroll up a little bit more? I think we're getting cut off on the bottom here. Yeah.
Just tell me where you want me to focus in.
Yeah, I think that's good right there. Let's just leave it right there. And Grant, if you have anything to add, you can do that. So,
yep.
Yeah, we took all of the goals and all the feedback that we received when we were in Connecticut, plus, based on our assessment, which entails, I've gone over this before, but climate, landform, water, access and circulation, developing microclimates. For instance, a greenhouse is a microclimate, plants and animals, the built environment, and of course, the built environment centers around the rehab of the house and a couple other elements in the landscape. And then the zones of use, which are activity nodes, which there will be several of those here. And then soils and fertility. And then we also take a look at the goals around the cultural, social, etc. aspects of the plan. And it's our job to translate all of that into the physical landscape. So this, you have to remember, this is a first draft. This is more or less a concept map. We haven't detailed plants yet, and you'll see an overabundance of plants. We do that purposely. We'll probably scale that down some. And then as we're writing the report, once we get more feedback, and as we're writing the report, then we will detail even more of it, and you'll see plant lists and a plant key. So we have all of those lists. I sent Tira a master list of that, and we'll be selecting our plants of that. And those are, they apply to this particular climate in Connecticut, climate, soils, etc. So once we upgrade and we look at working on the report, then all those plants will be entered into this design, and they'll be in the report, a master plant list. So if you go to the front of the property, off the main road, we have a farm stand for any yields that are higher than what you're actually going to be using for the people that are involved in the project, and for school programs or whatever it is, the people that are going to come there, and for a farm to table experience, et cetera, et cetera. And then depending on the distribution of produce out of the gardens, whatever we have in excess could be sold at a farm stand, which is right off the road. Below that is the central drive coming in and parking. The issue with the parking is that there's really not that much space there, and we didn't want to overcrowd things with automobiles. So we're basically, the footprint of that is similar to what's already there right now. We'd like to see that either to keep it in gravel so that it's permeable, or to do permeable pavers out there so that groundwater can sink down into the ground. We don't want a paved driveway, because then you have this incredible amount of runoff, and because of the gradient there, would end up going all the way back to some of the plantings. We don't want to compromise the plantings. And so along there, on the south side of the building, we're recommending a patio space with a possible outdoor kitchen and a cob oven, which is a sand, straw, clay mass oven. It's a traditional oven. Also, over that back space, it would be, wonder if we could build a pergola there with grapevines or some other type of grains over to the left side, what we're looking at here right now. And then, of course, there's the parking, and then there will be trees to the south side of the parking so that we can get shade in the parking lot, because we know what happens, especially in the summer, to cars that are parked there. And it would just be nice to get some more shade in that area. And then along the southern strip of that, we'll plant either a hedgerow or more plants. If you keep going to the east, to the right, so we'll work that way. There'll be more or less a spiral medicinal and culinary herb, or culinary, however you'd like to pronounce it. And then below that, you'll see there's a lot more plant culture, a lot of native species, pollinators, small trees. There'll be fruits, small fruiting shrubs. It's a big mix of things in what we call a plant guild. And in a plant guild, these are plants that have different functions. For instance, nitrogen fixers, uh, attractors for pollinators, and et cetera, et cetera. So those, again, this is just a representation to begin with. And I think that some of these plant cultures are going to be scaled down some so that it's more doable on a human scale. But this is the concept that we're putting out here. And then around the herb garden, you see a food forest, a sun trap. Remember that the bottom of this is south, the top of it is north. So what we are doing is smaller plant culture to the south, so we have enough available sunlight, and then the proper spacing so we get enough air that runs through these, so we're not bogged down with fungus, et cetera. As you get farther north, we're going to be doing larger trees. Those will be trees like hickory and chestnut that produce nuts. So we have a combination of nut, fruit, culinary, medicinal herbs. There'll be signage around all of this and by the way, all of the movement around the property is a trail system that we're working on, so that it'll be a continuous trail system, like a loop, so that people can go through it. There'll be more or less a self-guided tour with signage. Off to the left, you see the annual gardens, which are already there. So we'd like to make sure that those get planted every year through the season. We could do upwards of 3 different plantings in those. Early spring, like spinach and peas. Once those come out, they can be replaced with something else. And then there's hardy cole crops like kale, collards, et cetera, that can go in. So in other words, we want this thing to cycle through the year, and we'll give instruction on what that looks like and how to do an annual garden properly. Most of the herbs, flowers, and trees, fruiting shrubs, those will all be, as much as we possibly can, they're a minimum of 80% perennial. So they won't require as much care. You don't have to plant them every year. And then in the herb area and in some of the food forest in the south part of it, if we need more space, if the annual production starts to grow and expand, then we'll have more space in order to be able to put more of those in and pull back a little bit, maybe on the herbs and some of the fruiting shrubs. So all of that is expandable. All of it will, in the future, depending on how things work with the annual gardens, then we can add more of that in. If you go off to the right, you don't see underneath this. It's real a little bit hard to see the topo map in here with the contour lines, but you can see the ramp that goes down to the bottomlands. That will be wheelchair accessible, and then there's also steps that go down that run into a trail system. It's actually a boardwalk through what we perceive, and it's already very wet down there up against the ridge, the upper ridge. As you go down, it's wet, and there's also runoff, which appears to be from the road, storm drains that go down, and there's a big culvert at the bottom that empties into the bottomlands. We want to create a wetland there with aquatic species. Those will purify that water, along with it'll be a good teaching element.
Wayne, do you want me to switch to the other plan then?
No, just hold on here for just a minute. You'll
Okay.
see that in the bottom right-hand corner, this will all be wetland, and you'll see that better on the other plan. We didn't want to stick everything on one plan. We want to be able to give everybody a good view of what's going on. So we divided it up in half. Anyway, those aquatic species, like I said, they'll purify water. For instance, like cattails, if we use a thin leaf cattail, they don't spread as much. And Phragmites and burrweed, I go on with all kinds of plants that we could put in there, including hopefully pond lilies, American lotus, Sagittaria, which is a beautiful plant. These are beautiful flowering plants. They'll bring back a lot of the indigenous wildlife from the frog culture all the way down the line. And then, for instance, like a cattail purify up to 90% of the water. So we took into consideration this runoff if it's coming off the road and then the upper slope above the road across the main drag. We wanted to make sure that this water goes through a process of purification. The plants will do the work for us. If you scroll down and let's just finish up on this section. If you scroll,
That's as much scroll down as I can do.
no, but I mean, so we can see the top of this particular representation.
Scroll up.
Yeah. Good. And then go back over toward the left some more, so we can see the open space and yeah, good. So the rain garden is in there. One thing that Maura brought up is we had put cisterns next to the building, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a downspout that runs straight into the rain garden and move the cisterns around the building a little bit. That'll be water that gets held for future use, and that can all be used in all of the gardens. And then the rain garden will receive the runoff from the roof, which is the highest ridge on the property. And then in the rain garden, we're going to be designating plant species that can take water and also go through dry periods. Above that, there are terraces because there's a slope that comes down on the side of the building from the road. Those will have a plant culture in, and then if you notice those little white ovals in there, that's a path that runs through the terrace. I mean, that steps that run down toward the rain garden into the open space. And then the beige or tan, there's another trail that runs through there. There's going to be access to the terraces all the way through here. Those will be an assortment of, because of the shade from the building, there'll be shade-loving plants. Just as point of fact, even hostas, which is about probably 120 different species of hostas, those are edible. Those are sold on, when I was in China, they're being sold in the vegetable market. So we're going to be inserting plants like that. But if you get a little bit farther to the left side, we're going to have more sunlight. So all the plants that are going to go in, it's going to be based on available sunlight. And the terracing, and then that white strip that runs from the top corner of the building, we'll have to show you all pictures of that, but that would be a stone element with an entrance through it. But again, we'll have to show you pictures of that. And right now we're working on a 3D representation of this, along with a couple other pictures that will show you more of what this looks like in 3D, so you can get a better feel for it. It'll have the trees in it, it'll have all of the built elements, it'll have that stone element in there. So this is the way we figure would lay out, with a lot of open space for events. People can sit out there, a fire pit, a greenhouse, which can be used for annual starts. And we're going to give you plans to do the greenhouse with no propane, no wood heat. It's just going to be using the ambient temperatures. And I'll explain all that. We'll explain all that in the report. So you'll have directions on how to do all that. All of what's going on here included in the report, like I said, will be plant species. There'll be nurseries and where to be able to access the plant species. There will be directions for planting annual gardens. There'll be directions for planting for building soil and building fertility. To the right of the annual gardens, if you go up a little bit where it says food forest, there's a 4-bin composting system. We'll explain how to do all that. And then I'm going to be giving you, I'm working on a fertility program. What I've done was I have a 70-page fertility program. That's the basis of what we do in terms of fertility, but I'm scaling that back down to about 20 pages for this particular project. And it will have very simple methods on how to develop proper fertility and to build strength in the soil. The key to this whole thing is to build 3 to 8% organic matter in the soil, and that's where we're going to be. Above 8%, it really doesn't matter. Below 3%, you're not getting as much nutrition and as good mineralization in your soil. So that's going to be the direction and the focus. Also, below those compost bins, we have not a pergola, what we call it. I don't know, the word just doesn't come to me right now, but it'll be a covered structure that's open on all the sizes that people can, yes, right there, the kiosk, okay, that people can sit in. That's, again, a recommendation. If it works for everybody, we can look at that. All right, and then I think you ought to probably go over to the other plan. I don't want to take up too much time, just trying to give a synopsis of what's going on here. Okay, so we have the river, and if you go up a little bit higher on here so we can look at the bulk of the plantings down there. Yeah, keep going. Okay, so what's happening there is we would like to remove the non-native species, and there are a lot of those. This was originally a floodplain. In all of our research, what we found is when it was dammed, it's not a floodplain anymore. But what happens is those soils are highly permeable, very sandy. The other thing that we took a look at was all the chemicals that were being used in the textile plant. We think there's still a lot of those because when this area did flood periodically through the year, a lot of those poisons basically were thrown up on this ground. So in order to purify this, it's going to be the plant culture that does it. Some of the points that were brought up is that we're going to need some engineers, some moist soil tests down in the bottom. We've addressed those in the revision on the report, and we are now gathering addresses, and we're going to be speaking with people. There was a little bit of a mix-up on a couple of the water areas farther upstream and downstream. We've addressed that. So because of the fact that we don't necessarily live in Connecticut, I mean, I'm familiar with the East Coast, but there were certain things that, of course, we didn't know about, but we're starting to find out more about them. And we will get into all that. We'll get in touch with the proper engineers and authorities and whatnot, and make sure all of that stuff is spelled out. The vernal pool, as you'll notice down in the bottom there, that is where all that water is moving from the culvert. And there is somewhat of a vernal pool there right now, more of a spring pool. But what we want to do is convert a lot of this into biological wastewater treatment and more of an aquatic area. And then that will drain out. So that whole area in there where there's no trees, where you see smaller plants and it's a little bit darker, that's what we're looking at. As you move over to the right, there are already sugar maples, et cetera, down there. We want to keep those. Those are the round circles with the dot in the middle. That means that we're going to keep those in place. And then all the other trees that you see in here, we want to do a planting with diverse indigenous Connecticut species, and it's going to center around the oak. We're looking at 9 different species of oaks. So there'll be a mixture of what we call red and white oak, and then there'll be an assortment of other trees. So we want to diversify again. We're looking at historical tree cover. It's very difficult in a small space to get as much as we would like to see in there, but you'll notice that toward the bottom, there's smaller trees. They get larger, and then toward the north side, they get even larger. So we're looking at sun angles, advantages for sun, how to get everything to work right. This is a real puzzle that we've gone through many times. We're going to have a lot of west sun in here, which will be very good. So we've got south, west. In the north, of course, we want taller trees. And in the east side, that's going to be blocked. We want to keep a lot of the trees that already run along the river. Those are species that are indigenous to this particular area of Connecticut. I think that's it in a nutshell. Tira, I don't know how much more you want me to go into this because I know we're limited for time, but
Well, actually here, we're not as limited for time as we would have been at the library because they have a hard stop at 8 because of staffing. We have
okay.
no hard stop here because I'll just lock up whenever. That doesn't mean other people don't feel time limits, but
Okay.
it is a different situation. So we can go into as much detail as the group wants to go into. But you know, that's been like 25 minutes of exposition. So it is probably a good time to get some questions. If you're in the Zoom room and you have a question, just unmute yourself because when I'm screen sharing, I can't see everybody's hands raised and stuff. So I will rely on you to, if you're online attending, just unmute yourself, identify yourself so that I can have it for when I try to transcribe this tomorrow, and make your question or comment. But anybody can feel free. This is totally informal.
Yeah, one thing I do want to say is that this is not fixed. So if there's other things that people want to see in here, we're going to take all that feedback and enter it into the design. This is a creative process for everybody. So don't be shy. We're not like sitting here thinking this is the way it's going to be. This is the way it has to be. Okay.
And Matt Polsky had his hand up. And by the way, for anybody who came in a little later, we've got sticky notes and pens over here. If there's a comment you want to make about a certain area, rather than marking up these color copies, just write your comment on there. I mean, address it to Wayne, but so that I can get a record of it, just stick it on the area if it's specific to an area on the plan.
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
Wayne, you mentioned engineers. What type, what flavor of engineers are you looking for? Water engineers, geotechnical, environmental, what kind of engineers are you thinking of in this regard in terms of the wetlands?
Yeah. So Marlo, right? Her name is Marla.
Yeah, Marla, was the one who provided you with those extensive.
Right, so she sent a response to our assessment and mentioned that we would need soil tests, especially for the bottomlands. We already have soil tests that we took, but it was more for the upper area, which I think makes sense. And then I can't remember, Grant, maybe you could address this more because Grant, we edited the assessment and then Grant also had a conversation with Dan. So Grant, maybe you want to address this?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we've got you, Grant.
Okay, yeah. The insight we got from Marla was that we would need to get a qualified soil specialist in to map on the ground where the wetland soils are. And then in addition to that, we would need an engineer to assess the flood storage and conveyance capacity of this land currently, and then what it would be over time as we implemented this plan so that we can ensure we're not, going to increase the risk of flooding for the rest of people downstream.
Okay.
So, and he gave us a name. He recommended a Janet Blanchette, who had been involved in some of these meetings before,
She's right here in the room with us.
who also may have records of pollutants in the water coming out of the culvert. So this is an ongoing correspondence right now.
Does that answer your questions, Matt?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Who else has questions?
Wonderful.
Nope.
I don't know if she knows her name was brought up or if,
She does now.
but she's someone we want to talk to a little more about that.
I feel like we can probably arrange that.
Oh, I might the vernal pool there. That's a specialized. Yeah, that vernal pool, it's a specialized habitat. So we will need to have a qualified wildlife surveyor come in the spring just to confirm that. So we can't call it a vernal pool for sure right now, but it's seasonal standing water.
There's another I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Peter Shimano.
Okay, hi.
I'm curious because as a science teacher, is there a space going to be allocated for like an outdoor classroom?
Right in the middle of.
Why, yes, there is.
Right there.
Or is-
Right here is where it's indicated.
Oh, okay, I keep
Um,
looking at this one over here. Okay, good.
Yeah, but for whatever it's worth, at least to some extent, this entire property can act as a kind of classroom space, since we're talking very extensively about linking its function to what's happening up with the career pathways in the school, and also, some adult education opportunities. But as far as the designated space, yeah, this is.
Right, and then in the upper area, we left that space open. We can set up chairs, we can set up however you want to go about it. But that will be another opportunity when we have groups out there.
Alvin?
We're talking about space, but I have no idea how many.
Well, I can tell you that the actual 65 main property itself, which is what's referred to as the main activity area, is 0.55 acres. And then all this riverine, just doing rough estimates using the parcel map, it comes out between 3 and 3.5. So I've been using 3.2 acres as the.
So the whole area is roughly 3 acres.
Yeah, well, no, the whole area is 3.5 altogether.
Is the water quality from the French River gonna be suitable for irrigation or not?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Is the water quality from the French River gonna be suitable for irrigation?
I don't know. See, there's an issue with that. We'd have to get in touch with the DNR, and they don't like people taking water out of a river.
You
I've
can
been through-
take anything up to 50,000 gallons a day.
Oh, they do allow that there?
Yeah.
We would have to test that water and find out. So that would be another thing to get a test on that water. We could even probably go through somebody in this group might know where to steer us and what direction to do that. I would want to test that water. If we're going to be bringing that back onto the land, I want to know what's in it.
Dan Mullins, are you still on? Because you might have some insights there.
I am here. Hello, everybody.
Hi,
Hey
Dan.
there.
You're right. Yeah, so we could assist with getting some water quality data. I can't speak specifically now on what types of contaminants might be in the water, but I believe there's some water quality data out there available, and if not, we can certainly assist with trying to obtain some.
I'd like to chime in too. This is Mara from ECCD. And as far as, that's a long way to Portage water from the river. If we can get water from the roof and test that, and if that is appropriate, I don't know, maybe it's not, but that as far as watering like vegetables and things that people are going to eat, you definitely would want it to be, but I would say closer to the source of where, because most of those things are up closer to the building, is typically, I think, what people do. And I would even say if, the rain garden, instead of just putting water into a rain garden, I'd rather, if it could be used, see that used. And I guess those cisterns, as far as how big they are, and then where that water was going to come from, Wayne, for the cisterns, was a question I had too.
Right. So that footprint of that home, of that building, I'm thinking that it'll be upwards of over 100,000 gallons of water a year. So as far as the cisterns go, we would like to get a minimum of 1,000 gallons per cistern. And we only have 2 in there on the north side. We can certainly add a couple of them on the south side, and all of that water could be channeled in for vegetables. And then there's those water tanks that sit on the edge of the annual gardens. We can find a way to move water over there also. But I agree with you, but I think that there'll be enough water to do not only a rain garden, we might shrink the size of the rain garden a little bit, but all of that water that comes off the roof can certainly be used. And we can put a gross filter on that off the roof. It'd be what's known as a primary roof washer. So if there's any sediment, or if there's whatever that's coming off that roof, we can filter that out, and that can be used for vegetables. And once we build the fertility in the soil, if there's any issues around the absolute purity of the water, because no water in this world anymore is completely pure, if the fertility is built up and it's good, and we're doing a lot of mulching and whatnot, our soil life will take care of a lot of those issues. So yes, I agree. We've got a lot of opportunity off those roofs and off those structures, including even off the greenhouse. We can set up a system in there where we can collect water. So anywhere where there's a hard surface like that, we'll be able to move water around.
So just for reference, the structure has a brand new roof, and it will have brand new gutters installed when the roofers come back to finish that project in the spring. So if there's something that we need to ask them to do in terms of directing flow from the roof, I should get that information from you before they come back.
All right, we'll do that. And then also we will give you the quantities that are coming over there. And I just run a formula on that. It's very simple. So you'll see how much we'll also our main concern with cisterns is to make sure that we've got enough water for the dry season, which usually July, August, September. But what's been happening, like even here in Southern Illinois, it used to be that way when I was farming here. We'd have incredibly dry July, August, September. Now, and I'd say in the past 7 or 8 years, we've been getting rain all through the summer. So it's a little bit tricky. That's why we want to have enough storage for backup.
Any other questions in the online or in the room? Just
One other thing I do
toss it
want
out there.
to, one other thing I just want to finish up about water is that if we do have to use city water, there are different kinds of filters that we can set up and take out, whatever chemicals are using to purify water in city water. But ideally, like at my house last year, I never used city water. Everything came out of my cisterns. And I can tell you, I think that the health of the plants is much better when we're using rainwater.
So this is Valerie. I have a very specific question. In the area that's labeled open space, is that grass that's on the open space, and how is it maintained?
I think it would be grass. It's always been very tricky with grass. A lot of people will say, get rid of it and everything. I like it for social gatherings. How it would be maintained, it would have to be mowed. And
Or you could pasture your horse.
Well, obviously,
or-
that was what I was thinking, Blackie.
Yeah, even if we were to do something like white clover and whatnot, it still at some point has to be chopped a little bit. So we can come up with the proper plants for that. But it'll have to be maintained. It's such a small area that you could almost use a non-powered hand mower on it.
Well, that was what I was wondering about, was a non-powered hand mower, and wouldn't that be cool?
It would be great. It would be great.
And then the larger question, and I don't know how many people are in the room that haven't attended the previous presentations, but you were talking earlier about the amount of work to create this plan on the ground. So can you talk about, maybe it's not you that talks about it, but who and how do we go from what it looks like today to something that looks like this depiction?
Right. So our contract is to develop the design. If we want to go further with that, of course, when it comes around to implementation, I like to be there. Grant and I would be there to oversee and help measure things out and do all that work. But the implementation, you're going to have to hire a crew to come in and put it all in based on our instructions and our design. So I guess Tira would have to address that at some point. I don't know
Right,
exactly.
so the plan on this grant, which is a planning grant, this workshop process will go on monthly through September of this year. And then the project partners, which is me, Tyche, Teague, Connecticut RC&D, and ECCD, will come up with the full master plan, which includes not just the stuff relating to the property, but the educational tie-in, the small business tie-in. Following that, clearly my role in it is to find the implementation money through another series of grants. Now, I have some ideas as to what programs I'm going to pursue. That's not exhaustive, and that's part of the research that we'll be doing in putting that master plan together. But there's no way any of this happens without more grant funding. It's
Right.
just
And
it's the universe we live in.
One other point is that I really would like to oversee the implementation. the issue that we've run into, I have people all over the country that either were former students or they colleagues, and I've had them implement a lot of our projects in the past. I've sent them all over the country and whatnot in order to be able to manage the implementation, because typical landscapers don't understand most of the time, a large percentage of them. I don't want to make a blanket statement about this, but most of them don't understand an edible landscape, how things lay out, et cetera. It's pretty standard the way that landscapers put things together. So if there's room for us to be part of that next step, we would certainly like to be involved in that and make sure that this gets laid out once everybody agrees to how this is going to look in the end, then et cetera, et cetera.
And I would like to see that too.
Good.
The other thing, and I'm sure we're already thinking about this, but I am imagining that there's a tremendous amount of community involvement working alongside contractors, so that there's a sense of the ownership that goes into this, so that it's not just, here's this bright shiny thing, now here it's yours, take care of it. That people have invested time and their own effort into it, that are the people who ultimately will be benefiting from it and responsible for it.
I couldn't agree more. If people in the local community should be a huge part of this, because that is part of the educational experience too, by doing all of this, and then they have a hand in it and there'll be more interest going forward. I certainly agree with that.
I'd like, oh, go ahead.
Touch on the points of the,
Gardens.
up in here. And
Hold on, guys, we've got a little crosstalk. So Charlie, hold your question for 1 second. So the gentleman in the room and then you.
Will these be community gardens, and is there an opportunity to expand these in the event they become popular?
So the annual garden that you see pictured there is already a community garden.
Yep.
I will tell you, we have not had a lot of uptake on it.
But
So what we've done with it is we've supplemented Teague's gardens.
Okay.
But the intention for that original annual garden has always been a community garden, with the intent really of serving the community in Three Rows, the communities in the senior housing who don't have property they own. Now, the recreation department does have the ability to take registration. Again, we've had very, very little take up on it thus far, so we've been supplementing Teague. But I think as this program becomes more visible, we get more take up. So, yeah. So Charlie, you had something, go ahead.
well, I'm sure I did, and I'll probably remember it, but the issue about the soil scientist and the civil engineer valid, and certainly logical that any permit that comes before the town has to have those things addressed. And I'm looking at the ramp for people getting down with a wheelchair or baby carriage, and wondering, how about skateboards? And there's just a lot of stuff that it's opportunities that we can't plan for all of them, nor do we want to stop all of them. We do want to make sure there's no erosion. The other issue that came to my mind was someone asked a question about irrigation. Perhaps they were thinking about irrigating the public gardens and that stuff up there. And I tend to think that we don't want to bring water from the river, but we probably will get a lot of infiltration up through the soil. And that's one of the things that somebody like Margaret Washburn, who is a soil scientist that works in the town, they can let us know that, hey, yeah, cattails or any other things that we plant there, we won't have to worry about watering them because they've got plenty of water right underneath their roots. Just a thought.
Okay, We will definitely take a look at, yep,
I have another comment
okay.
or question. It's Mara. So I think to just piggyback on what Valerie was talking about, I think it's super important that in the implementation grant, that there's definitely a commitment from whomever is going to be taking care of all of this, because we often find, we put in rain gardens and things and the maintenance does not get done. That's the whole success of the whole project, is that somebody is committing, yes, even if it's just to pieces, I'm going to take care of the rain garden. I'm going to, I'm going to do the mowing. So I think that's like super important to identify that, to make sure that this is actually something that people want and that they're going to be, helping with to make it a success.
Yeah, so I would suggest, just as a part of this workshop process, since we're trying to take things kind of in like units and mini units. So in this one, we're obviously reviewing this first concept plan. We're gonna, again, and this is going to be easier for the people here in the room with the Post-it notes and the markers, make specific comments on specific areas so we can take the picture. And then in the next one, maybe then look at that next revision. I would say in the last sort of subunit of this unit, which would be March, maybe we can put it in our minds that that's going to be what we start to discuss, was the operations of the property, which would then lead into the next unit of 3 months, which would be where we start to talk about the connection to the school. Because I think there is some intersection there. Obviously, there's some responsibility that falls directly on the town somehow, because this is a town-owned property, but then also maybe starting to talk about, is there a dedicated commission for this property, or does it become the ownership of the Conservation Commission, or part ownership of the Conservation Commission and the Agriculture Commission, and in terms of scheduling things? All of those things are open questions. What we, as the not just the people sort of responsible as project partners, but as a group of stakeholders, have to determine what is real, right? What is aspirational and what is reasonable, and how do we get there? So that's my, again, suggestion within the process, is that, next one is more looking at the physical, and then in March, thinking about how it works. That's, if that works for everybody.
Yeah, and it's Mara again. I just I want to add too that I don't know if there's anyone here from the Quiet Corner Garden Club. They were interested in this project, and I strongly encouraged them to come to these meetings. So I think that is definitely potential as far as taking care of some of the plantings. So I will again encourage them to come to the next meeting.
There was a member, I think, Marcia Kettle, are you still on the Zoom?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so there is at least one person who is involved with the Quiet Corner Garden Club in here. Somebody else did email me for the Zoom link, but I did not see her come into the room.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure they were involved.
Did I see a hand go up in the? No? Okay.
Question, the Wyndham County Master Gardeners, have they been active in this? Have you heard anything from them? Have you?
I have not reached out to them directly. Anybody and everybody who views themselves as a stakeholder, which to me is anybody who feels they can benefit, is welcome. If that's a connection that you're able to make by forwarding them the next information, that'd be fantastic.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great. Randy?
Wait, how big are the water tanks gonna be? Cisterns? How big were the cisterns going to be?
The cisterns?
Yes, that's what he's asking.
The size of the cisterns?
Yes,
Yeah, We feel that they should be at least 1,000 gallons.
All right,
And
so
we can get those in any shape, any diameter, height. We just have to fit them in there properly.
all you gotta do is figure out how to get 25,000 gallons of water into a 1,000-gallon tank. If you were to put 1 acre inch of water is 27,000 gallons. So you might as well just carry the water from home in a watering can if you're only gonna have 1,000 gallons there.
Well, no, we want to add, we would probably have upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 gallons. And those cisterns on that north side of the building would have an overflow that would go directly into the rain garden and also into the gardens on the terraces.
And are they above ground or below ground?
What's that? The cisterns? They'll be above
Yes.
ground. They'll be above ground. And then the winter they'll get emptied out.
So just
So
in the next iteration of whatever your narrative plan is, Wayne, I think we just sort of like to see how that math pencils out on that
Yeah,
dimensionally and capacity wise.
we'll get that in there for sure.
Mr.
Another
Lincoln.
question. I was looking at that, the map, trying to figure out where that culvert comes from. There is a culvert that I know that comes out right beside the library, but this one, you've got that, right, ooh, it just disappeared. It's almost like it just comes out of the side of the hill. I don't know of any stream that leads into that, but it's curious. Because
There's,
I'm looking at Map Geo and trying to get more information on and it's not showing up, so.
I
We-
think this drainage that comes from, Charlie, that comes from, Bosha's Bakery parking lot, or what was that, nursery school or something? I'm pretty sure from that lot there, that comes down onto the road, and that may be what you're looking at.
That could be, but that would have to be just intermittent. So, I don't know, I got the impression from looking at this drawing that that was a current stream that was constantly running.
well,
And I
we've been-
don't know that stream, so I'm perfectly willing to be, I'm wrong, I'll go down the line.
Dan Malo, you sent over some site plans of the bakery earlier. That was in support of that idea that runoff is coming from the bakery. Is that right?
Yes, that's from under the bakery complex, under the road, under the adjacent property, and then through that culvert.
So that probably starts from up in the lots as well.
Stormwater though.
Probably coming down Belrose.
There's also on the road in front of the building, there are 2 storm drains. We were thinking that might be part of what's going on here.
Yeah, that would have to be an only stormwater runoff. The other culvert just upstream from that, it comes out of that pond on the other side of the road from the library.
Okay,
To Hamels Pond.
This is Janet Blanchett, and my company worked on mapping the town of Thompson's stormwater system. So right now, this moment, I'm not looking at that drainage area map, but I can provide in the future what the drainage area is and what part of the street, Superior Bakery, or anything is tied into that.
I'm pretty sure that the plan that Dan sent over had J&D's stamp on it. So, yeah.
Yeah, we
Wayne and Grant in the chat, Dan Mullins just dropped in a link to some information on the watershed, if you want to copy that and retain it.
Okay.
good, thank you.
And this is Mara. I'm just gonna add that, Judy Rondo actually, I was with her. I think that was one of the storm drains that we tested. So that information is somewhere, and I'm sorry, I don't, I haven't asked about it, but I know the town has it somewhere. It's MS4, I believe. So, they should have that information that Judy did, and I can, we can figure that out. Dan maybe can tell me when that was.
This has been a great mystery for Grant and I, of where that water is coming from. Should we leave it as a mystery in this kind of?
No, it's been tested, so we should get
Okay.
that information. I meant to follow up on that from the last meetings, but that is somewhere, that information.
Okay.
I know that I've worked with Judy Rondo on water sampling in that area, but we did it over at that pond. So, of course, that was years ago.
Yeah,
Somebody-
no, I was with her sampling culverts.
Yeah,
There was
okay.
ECCD was paid to do that by the town.
Good, okay.
Hey, JBL, I think you had a question a few minutes ago too.
Yeah, I was kind of piggyback on Mr. Blackburn's thing about the storage tanks and everything. And you're looking at putting these above ground, what may that would be taking away some of the aesthetics of what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're gonna keep them above ground, like you said, you're gonna drain them, but if you put the tanks in the ground, a good fiberglass tank, and you put it down 4 feet below ground, so you put in a little small pump to pump everything out. What you need, which would be mine electricity, and you wouldn't have to drain them out. You can keep the water right through the window, and also use it inside the building if you had to.
Right, so you're saying to bury them?
Yes, you'd be better off because you're taking a lot of space away if you can move above ground. And besides, now you're looking at a 1,000 gallon or a 5,000 gallon tank or whatever you want to use. That's a good sized tank.
It is. So we
It may be interesting to show it as an option,
Yeah,
Wayne.
Okay, so we can do that, and we buried them before, but we'll have to pump the water out of those.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't have to do it all for the winter. You know, if you
No,
have-
not for the winter.
No,
But
but they're not gravity feed.
Yeah, but if we do pump it, we can do it with solar.
Correct. Correct.
Because
Always options.
pump technology is very, very good right now, much better than it used to be. So, you know, we could do it with just a single panel, probably 80-watt panel, and pump it out.
Yeah, solar panels, you can put 2 or 3 in there, and you got some decent space when it's there, sure. You know, if you get a little more amperage.
Okay.
There's a possible issue with regulations that if you put in an underground storage tank, you have to have an inspection program and all that, even if you're putting water into the tank. So it's something to look into. But I like the idea of saving the water. I lived in a farm that we had a cistern for our drinking water. And we had to go out and flip a switch when it started raining so that the dirt off the roof wouldn't get into our drinking water. Nowadays, as Wayne points out, they have these preliminary filters that will take most of that away.
Right, so primary roof washers, and then what happens with the drinking water, first of all, we'd have to get that water tested to find out what's in there, nitrates, et cetera. And then it would have to run through another filter system if we're going to use it for potable. That might be an issue with the city. So we'd have to check on that, but we've run it through usually just charcoal filters at diminishing microns, like a set of 3 in series, to get it into use for drinking water. We've done it. That's another thing that we're going to have to look into in terms of regulations and.
Well, I wouldn't be super concerned about using it as drinking water. The structure, the building is on the city water line.
Right.
And once it's functional, I mean, it's not a residence, it's going to be essentially an educational and business center. So as long as it's fundamentally drinkable out of the tap, there's no real need to create that cached water as a drinking water source. I think its purpose is exactly as you say, for infiltration and treatment, and then irrigation of the plantings.
Right.
You know, it certainly is possible. All things are possible to make it potable water, but there's no real need.
All right, so in our report, we will mention there is a possibility it could be potable. we won't get into too much detail. We want to make sure that we address all this. And then in terms of placement of the cisterns and whether or not they're going to be buried, we'll find out the regulations on that. And we will give the two alternatives, buried or above ground.
Can I just make a comment? I'm Debbie Maynard.
You might have to speak up a little.
What comes to mind when I think about the tanks being above is the children and the way that education, to me, that would be a benefit to have them up and visible when it comes to the children and education. Because I don't know why, I just think it would be.
No,
That's just my idea.
I
just
see your
wanted
thought
to throw that
process.
out there.
If part of the purpose of the master property is to have this outdoor classroom in terms of, you know, gardening or agriculture or any number of related subjects, yes, that showing is so much more effective than telling. And if the thing's underground, you can't really show it. So I think there is virtue to that point of view. So again, showing the different options, right? Because ultimately this becomes a master plan that we're going to be pricing out and trying to install. What becomes feasible, one may be more feasible than the other as well.
Right.
So we should just know both of those things.
Well, we could leave one above ground for education and have a sign that there are 3 more buried on this land. You'd still be able to use it and point to it. Maybe there's a spot where it's not good ground or maybe granite, you couldn't bury it anyway. Good spot to leave one above ground.
Right. So one of the things we do when they're above ground, if they're in the shade, they're fine. And the side where if we have them in the sun, then we build a trellis around them and plant vines in order to be able to shade the water so it doesn't get overheated and grow a lot of algae in there. Although what I have found, I like algae if I'm using these for irrigation, I like the algae because it brings more nutrient into the ground, but excess of that, it'll clog things up. So we usually build a trellis, grow vines up around it to give the cistern some shade. And that is another beautiful element that we put in the landscape.
So we're about an hour in, and what I'd like to do, and again, we'll have to coordinate this with Zoom room and live room, is do the marking up of the plan so we can take a picture with the feedback. So I guess we can start it with if you have something that you've seen on this plan that you have a very specific question or comment on, just come up, grab a Post-it and a marker and you know, put it on there. For folks in the Zoom room, somebody will have to volunteer to sort of transcribe that for you. And I'll go back and forth between the plans. So it just needs to be somebody other than me. Matt Polsky's walking forward. It must mean he's volunteering to do that.
But I can.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Brody Brown.
This is Wayne. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, thanks. So just call them out, guys. And if you want me to show anything on the plan, I'll go to it back and forth. So right now I have the, which one do I have up here? I'm gonna zoom back out. This is the site that shows the Riverside property. Call them out, guys. Or just walk up if you're in the room. Also get pizza.
Yeah, I'm only transcribing for
Yeah. Yes, Joe is only transcribing for Zoomers. Anybody else just walk up. But since we're trying to share this information with the Zoom audience, if you are writing down, also let the folks in the Zoom room know what it is you're commenting and on what aspect.
We just stick it on here?
Just stick it on there. Yep.
I'm just looking for potential expandable community garden because in the event when people see something like this and you build on the success, more people want to become part of it. And they can really see the utility in that.
Thank you.
Copies online that we can print.
I can forward you copies of these. We found they were very difficult to print. Oh, Grant, I don't think Wayne's come back yet. So we had trouble printing these. There's some kind of transparency layer on them. I don't know if it just made the data set too big. Janet actually had to print them on her large scale printer in her office. Our plotter here couldn't handle it either.
Did you try to print it on a standard 8x11 paper?
I tried to do it on the large scale printer here, and we couldn't do it here. Janet had to do it from hers, which is undoubtedly a better printer.
And did it still show up fuzzy, or it was pale?
No, the one she made are fantastic. We couldn't print them at all in town hall. Just so you know.
Yeah, I wonder if it's the printer.
There's a lot of interference with you, Grant, but you can email me separately. So the answer is I can forward the copies
I can
to you.
look into that.
Thank you. I have my emails here.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. How about anybody in that Zoom room with something they want to comment on this plan?
This is
And-
Val. This is
Go ahead,
Val.
Valerie.
If Mr. Perotti Brown could please write in that we would like to push mow the open space with hand mowers.
Sure, her name is on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and but by we, that means you and Dave?
Oh, I didn't know that I was signing up. No.
I mean, you said we, Valerie, so I.
That was the royal we.
Oh, she wants to get one of them electric ones to feed that, you know.
Ken, could you just call out what you just marked up? So
He talked about the ultimate goal of having what's gonna be in the different oaks and cattails, etc. What I'm interested in is, before we can even get to planning that, what is it gonna take to get that area thin so we can do that? Because that's been just raw forest land for, since the flood, etc.
right,
You know,
right.
3 years or so. So there's a lot of work that's gonna go into preparation of that, and there's definitely a very big cost associated with thinning that.
Is Wayne back? No, Wayne's not quite back yet. In absence of Wayne being back and with Grant having trouble with his connectivity, Maura, do you want to? I mean, I think we've always talked about we have to have a strategy for clearing the invasives anyway. Oh, here's Wayne back. There you go. Yeah, so Wayne, a question came up about the strategy to mostly to clear the invasives, but also to prep that what we've been calling the bottomlands near the river. You want to talk about that at all?
Right, so that's gonna have to happen right at the beginning. Clear the invasives. Ideally, to take some of those larger trees and to send them to a mill and be able to use some of that wood for the project. Also to chip a lot of it. And then we're gonna need a lot of organic matter down in that bottomland on the floodplain. So the steps would be to remove it. And also on the top, up on the ridge, we're gonna do the food forest. We'll have to do some removal there. But the ideal would be to reincorporate that carbon back into the property. So if we could chip a lot of it, use it down in the bottomlands there for when we're planting trees, but also bring in as much organic matter. We can do it. The utility usually has a lot. There's all kinds of ways to gather all that together. We want to build the fertility back into that floodplain. So first steps is removal, and you're gonna have to hire somebody to come in and remove the trees that we'll designate that need to come out. Is
Dan
that,
Mullins, I see you took yourself off mute. I assume that means you have something to say here?
For me,
Yeah,
Well, I was just looking at, it's not relevant to what you're talking about right now. I was just looking up some more of the water quality data from the MS4 sampling, and I think I identified the culvert sampling that was taken. If it is the same one, it says Main Street. I'd have to go back and check the map that's created, but water samples came out high in E. coli and nitrogen. If that's the culvert. And Maura said she was present during the sampling, so it's probably the culvert.
Now I can ask a question of my friends and colleagues from the Planning and Zoning Commission. When we saw the redevelopment plan for the bakery, there was some stuff addressing the drainage and runoff there. Do any of the three of you remember?
No, I remember that the drainage came down to, was that a nursery or?
The four of you,
school,
excuse me.
whatever,
The four of you, there's four planning and zoning guys here. I said three.
But there was a culvert there that the water came off the bakery truck lot and went into that culvert and it had to go under the road.
Right.
And I don't know where it goes under the road.
So I think that is what this culvert
I think
is.
so.
Yeah. Yes, JBL.
We could run a droid.
Hold on, Charlie.
When those culverts were put in, they all made because of the back end of the property of 65 Main and all them houses. It's got the hill going down, so they put I remember my father telling me all of this. When this was all done and way back, they went down out that way because everything went to the river. So if you pay attention, when you go to come down, do the cat wash, all that stuff, there should be some culvert openings somewhere along on the bank and down low, somewhere close to where it's leveled out.
We had that all mapped out on the MS4 that was
Okay, there
done
you go. But that's where everything went. Everything at the most,
years ago.
where all those houses were put up. Behind the old Ocean Bakery, that whole area, that's where it all pretty much went.
Yeah, Charlie, you're up.
Yeah, that's probably, that's a big hillside over there and it makes a lot of sense. We also had E. coli and counts were high when I was doing those testings with the Conservation Commission years ago. That's one of the reasons we kept going back there. And they had geese in the backyard of the pond, at the pond across from the library. The rest of it, there must be a storm drain plan from when they built it. No matter years ago, there should be something, but it would be possible to run a camera up there with a remote and be 100% sure. A lot of toxins, a lot of hydrocarbons would be coming off with the truck traffic. So that would like to be some sort of a filter there. Let it run over some riprap or let it run over some gravel or something that, let it run over some moss. You know, there's plenty of opportunities for that. The vision is good. Is Janet Blanchette still on? She might know off the top of her head. There is a standard size cistern that's used for fire control at certain development projects. There's one that's going in just down the French River from there. That I think is subterranean. But I like the idea of showing kids and other visitors that whether they buy one of those used 275-gallon things for food grade for $50 and grow their own food. Yeah, ever since you showed me those slides a few weeks ago, I've tried to figure out how to put a greenhouse on the front of my roof.
Hey, Wayne, I just have a couple of practical things regarding, let me see. Yeah, this one I want to show. So as lovely as the idea of this fire pit is, I think we have to scrap it from the plan.
Okay,
It's too far from the road. If there is a fire incident, the access for the fire departments is terrible. This land, which is public, right? I mean, it would be one thing if this was my private estate. If I had that fire pit there, it would be fantastic. I would be assuming all the risk if I lit my backyard on fire. But this is these people's backyards, and again, this is down a slope and the road is all the way up here. I think that we just have to scrap that for practical purposes. Probably the second one as well. I think the liability of having a fire pit for the town is just too high.
okay,
Again, if this was a private property, I think it would be a different issue. And the other practical thing that occurs to me is this line of trees. I understand the purpose for the shade, but that is directly on this property line for this residential multifamily. They are, I believe, coming to, I think that they filed a building permit to put an extension back here. I think this just encroaches a little bit too much.
okay, easily done.
Yeah, those are just super, super granular, simple things, but I think from a practical point of view, we've got to scrap those two things.
Good, this
Maybe
is the
that
kind of-
one fire pit could be the outdoor classroom. And what about the idea about having braziers at picnic tables? Do we have that at certain other places in town?
Not in our town. They've been suggested in a couple of concept plans that we had for the Belding Corticelli site, the student team that we had. But I am not aware of any open fire areas that the town has. Ken, we don't have any. No. And I mean, there may be some at like Quadic State Park or at West Thompson Lake, but those are not our property or our problem. I don't think we want to have that as our problem.
Okay, easily done. We hit the delete button.
This is Valerie. I was wondering if Wayne would like to talk about recommended method for removal of invasive species. Is that FECON, grubbing, either, or something alternative?
It's a very difficult question, and I have to say that I am not a poison kind of guy, but I have used them in the
What
past.
about a controlled burn?
What's that?
A controlled burn?
Controlled burns won't-
uh,
Controlled burn is just going to regenerate what's ever there. That we've run into that before too. We've tried all kinds of different methods. My last thing we had on a farm, we had Russian olives all over the place, and honestly, we took the tractor out and cut the trees and then chained around the stumps and pulled them all out. It's a tremendous amount of work. We've done it all kinds of different ways. So we want to think this through a little bit more and see if we could do the most benign practice that doesn't run into overwhelming amount of work. So we'll need a little bit more time on that, but we're very conscious of how we're going to do that, and we will let everybody know sooner than later about what method we want to use. If any of you have ever done any removal like this, any invasive, because it's not just the Norway maples down there, there's some other invasives. We'll come up with a method. But like I said, I want to, through the years, I've always looked for ways not to have to use poisons. And we want to think through that a little bit more. That's why I can't give you a specific method that we're going to use right at the moment. We're thinking that through.
I will say that last winter, I did go to the Connecticut Land Conservation Council's, actually Alvin was there with me, and so was Brian Santos. You might have been in this breakout with me. There was a gentleman from CT Deep who did a whole hour presentation on recommended practices. Now, he was working with a larger area, that was, I think, more like a grassland, but I do think autumn olive was one of the species that they were having trouble with, that he described a strategy. So I'm sure I can get a copy of those recommendations to you, Wayne.
Yeah, we'd love to see that. The one other thing I have to say is once we restore the indigenous vegetation in all of these areas, you're going to notice that the invasives are going to start to disappear. So we've done rehab with prairie, with oak savanna, and once we get all these species in, what we consider invasives, they're there for a good reason also, because of the disturbance that we've created, but they start to get crowded out once we get a diversity of native vegetation in the ground. So, but this is time sensitive, and we have to figure out our initial impulse around this and what we want to do in order to be able to make space and sunlight for what we want to get in as a future plant matrix. So like I said, give us a little more time and we will come up with methods. And yes, Tira, if you could get us that report, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm sure I can get that sent. Brian Yacino had a question or comment, and then JBL.
Just real quick, Tara, CT Deep has their recommendations for removal of invasive species online. It's like a 1 or 2 page report. It's pretty straightforward, but they do recommend that they use herbicide on the stumps. And I think everyone that's in the room that is on a commission has heard me talk about how opposed I am to herbicides. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. Brian.
Right. So the typical thing is to cut the tree, you have the stump, we cut a channel across in the stump, and then what is typical and conventional at this point is to pour herbicides down in there in order to kill it. We're trying all kinds of different methods. This is why I said we'll just need a little more time on that.
Yacino?
Okay, no, I just had, winter comes up, I'm thinking less on the outside and more on the use of the building. So when we'll be using the building year round, just keep in mind that driveway, whatever we use for a surface is gonna have to be plowable. It's gonna have to be treated somehow so it's not slippery. And if we do pile snow, we've never had this area built up like this before. I don't know where snow would go.
On the grass.
Well, see, there's all kinds of plants and everything that we never had. Maybe we'll never get snow again, but I have to think about it.
That's what.
Because we want to use the building year round.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, so maybe, I mean, these words here are here, but maybe this tree then is not included so that you can plow directly onto the flat.
Okay.
So again, for practical purposes, this one might just have to be deleted from the plan. Good observation, Mr. Yacino. JBL, you were next.
Yeah, I want to go back to the gentleman about when he's cutting trees down and eliminating the stumps and stuff like that. Well, that's my realm. When you cut the trees down, you don't have to dig the stumps out. You can grind them down, because I used to do stump grinding back in the day when I had the business. You take a stump and you grind it down, you chew up anything around it. Then you cover it up with dirt, a little bit of sand, put some loam on it, and watch the grass grow. That's one way, and eliminates trying to get rid of stumps, because it takes stumps around here to this place in Smithfield, Rhode Island. It's called Smithfield Peak. They're gonna pay some big bucks bringing the stumps and stuff into them, or you gotta try to, mostly the landfill or transfer up in Thompson here will take them. We don't know, but me, it's easier to go in with a grinder, stump grinder, in the long run. You can grind down 2 feet if you want. Take it all out right there, you leave it on the ground. Makes good compost later.
Grinding is one option, and there's portable equipment, which probably could be run by a team of volunteers. And I think I heard a suggestion that we be more involved in making this thing happen. Another trick that I've seen recently was very clever. They drilled down into a stump with a pretty good sized hole and then bored into the side of it and started it on fire. Boy, did it burn. But it was just the
Sure that
stump.
it did.
It was just the stump. It was just the stump. And it was no chemicals.
Well, you don't need chemicals when you're grinding.
You don't need chemicals, you're right. Well, you'll need the gasoline for grinding them, but that you can grind them. You can grind them. We
So
can do-
I am curious to hear some input from our superintendent of schools who made it, I think this is the second one you've been able to make, right? You were at the launch and.
Hopefully I'll be able to make the rest of them as you get closer to programmatic things for the school. The thing that fascinates me about this whole thing is the whole greenhouse area and the outdoor classroom, because we applied for a grant for the mushroom container up on, we have an aquaponic farm already working on the campus. And just to have access to the greenhouse area in particular, so that the students could go down there and probably 3 seasons out of 4 be able to access that for classwork would be ideal. And I don't know what the outdoor classroom area is going to look like, if there's going to be a covering or there's going to be an area for kids to work, but that would be something that I would like to see there.
Thank you, Melinda. Another question I had, and let me go back to the other plan. Bear with me. So, I noted with delight, that you have this area that you've identified as an amphitheater. Which I think is fantastic. In your final iteration of this, Wayne, is this going to be a little more detailed, or are we still talking about this just conceptually?
No, we can detail that out. We're thinking about seating, but very simple. You know, people can actually sit there and there'll be somebody under the pergola that's giving a presentation. What kind of detail are you looking for there?
Well, something that, you know, because it is possible. And again, I'm thinking of like the mechanics of how we get this done, right? And probably we're not going to get, well, not probably, definitely, we're not getting everything done all at once unless I find some really remarkable grant program.
Right.
So in terms of things that I would, as a grant writer, choose as discrete portions, that probably is one, right?
Okay.
So the kind of detail that I could take into a separate grant application and have it look competent would be helpful.
Okay, we'll
And
think.
may I
we'll
say
do-
also, this is what you were talking about the other night, Kira. Have a plan that comes in at $9,000, so we don't have to worry as much about how we price it out and how we bid it.
Yeah, that's inside baseball, Charlie, but
it's part of this.
For some yes, for some things that's probably appropriate.
Right, and we can give you ballpark numbers on a lot of, on most of this. So if that's helpful to you.
Yes, well, and in fact, I think it's actually part of the deliverables in the contract, but we can
Okay.
talk about all that stuff.
All right.
Tara, that just opens up a whole other aspect of the connection to the school.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and clearly the if there's one through line that has been predominant in every session, it is that there is the connection to the school. It's been even more predominant than the original concept as, strictly speaking, a center for existing small businesses and startups of, for lack of a better term, grown-ups, right? Which is still in there and in that mix. But even the people from the business association, their enthusiasm for the school connection has been very, very high. Did I see, Janet, did you have a hand up? Yeah.
You know, kind of following up your thought about how this is going to have to be phased in the implementation. I mean, I guess the question I have, I mean, there's an ideal line, it's like upper and lower, but it seems like lower might have to be done first because there's very limited access for construction equipment or anything. If that whole upper garden thing is done, you're not gonna get construction equipment down the little narrow path. So is that something to consider?
I think in the creation of the master plan, absolutely. So yeah,
Yeah,
let's
you know.
stick that.
We can all, like, what Jan just said is, right, with a excuse me, the parking space there, you can leave that whole corner going down to the back, you can leave that wide open, and everything in that area on that map right there can be done after fact. So you can get the bottom end of it. Like she says, how you gonna get that out of there if you don't have some type of access?
Yeah, I think that all comes into consideration, not just as a part of Wayne's final deliverable, but our final deliverable on the planning grant. So yeah, all those things. Anybody have any other questions in the Zoom room, since I can't see you?
This is Mara. So that, Wayne, can you just talk a little more about what you envisioned for that outdoor kitchen patio space?
Again, that's just a basic concept right now, and we'll have to have more of a discussion about that. About how that would get used, and then when it would get, for what. In other words, I would ask the question, even though we came up with the idea, I would still ask the question, why? And is it important? And we feel that it is. It could be a really great element to be able to take food out of the gardens, take produce out of the gardens, and be able to prepare it as more as a demonstration than trying to cook for 20 kids. That's not going to happen. But at least as a demonstration. So countertops, a sink, a stove of some kind, something that's not going to be lethal. I doubt that an open flame gas stove won't work. But as I said, it'd be more for educational purposes. And if you have a gathering, it'd be nice to have countertops, even if it's people bringing food, a place to prepare, get everything set out, et cetera, et cetera. So more in line with that, not so much that you're going to have a big party with 50 people running around. You're going to be cooking for 3 days. I don't think that's the idea.
I will say that since the very beginning stages of this project, meaning just when we were planning the community garden, that's always been a partnership with Teague, and it looks like Ann Miller didn't make it tonight, but that has been on her wish list from the beginning, the ability to host community suppers, outdoor community suppers at this property, obviously for community building reasons, to call attention to the ability to, move from a garden space to a table space, just conceptually. So, although we do definitely have to scrap the fire pit right down by the river, is this second fire pit what you were talking about is the outdoor kitchen? Because I'm a little.
No.
No.
It's lower down, it's pointing, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's why I didn't see it, because it was off here. Okay, all right, so that makes more sense then.
Yeah, so we want to put a patio in there, a pergola, and the pergola we could say yes or no, but definitely not as intricate as a commercial kitchen, but something approaching that so that you could serve people. I think this would be key as far as, I don't know about, what size the numbers would be in terms of groups. If you did want to have let's call it a farm to table dinner and a gathering, how much cooking would you be prepared to do in a property this size? So we'd have to figure all that out and then look at, what sort of equipment we would need.
You have to factor in the Board of Health.
Right, of course. Of course, well, the brilliant thing is we have a commercial kitchen at the high school now, and Teague has a commercial kitchen as well. So we do have partners who have the food prep space. So that takes some of the pressure off of a full sort of rated kitchen here. But some supplemental cooking and certainly room for food service, I think would be important.
Right.
And last year, Teague for the first time, I believe for the first time, hosted the Infant Bowls, and I went to that. It was a fantastic event, and they did 2 seatings, but I'm looking at the open space, the grass area, put a tent there and, you know, be a much more elegant and inviting space, not knocking Teague at all, but, so I can picture something like that. So if that's one event, that means something similar to that.
Before you leave, Dr. Perotti Brown, representative of Marianapolis Preparatory Academy, what are the chances that you think Marianapolis might be interested in having some input here as well?
I'd say good. Yeah, I think community engagement is something we need to strengthen. So I think this would be a great opportunity.
Can I give you the homework of making a connection for me there? Because your dean doesn't answer my emails.
Which dean?
I don't know, the last one I tried to email.
I'm the academic dean, so if I'm not answering your emails, I'm really in trouble.
It's quite, most of the faculty or administration lives in town.
Yeah,
So it's a part of the community and.
All right, if you can make that connection for me, I'll be indebted to you, sir.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Night.
Good night, Joe.
We're free to walk this property, is that?
Oh, yeah, that is a town-owned property, so you can walk it at any time and see its current condition, which is very transitional, right? The building has been gutted on the inside and stripped on the outside. It's got a brand new roof. There's probably still a dumpster on the property and some leftover roofing supplies. Yeah, and the hazmat guys knocked over my bike rack, which doesn't make me happy, but yeah, so it's very transitional, but you can definitely get a sense of the space. I wouldn't necessarily recommend walking down on that riverside because there is it does kind of drop off and it would be a mess at this time of year, but.
If you were to prioritize this sort of grant funding, what would you say would be the #1 area that you would have developed first if it came to?
Well, I can tell you that my current strategy involves pursuing a couple of very large pots of money so that we could try to get it all done. It is likely that we have to phase it. In terms of function, I would rather work the front of the property, but in terms of practicalities, Janet's absolutely right. You've got to move from, you've got to keep your access in mind. So it is probable, if this gets parceled out, that we are working that riverfront area down there for the public park access first, and then moving up. The other thing about that is, in a lot of ways, that's the hardest stuff to do anyway. You're talking about felling trees and dragging them overland and grading and whatever else gets done down there. The stuff up on the closer to the road and around the house is more in line with gardening, although obviously still quite extensive. So, yeah.
Here, the farm to school grant, which they just went in, we didn't put one in this year, but it'll come up again next fall. I mean, when you think about the greenhouse, that would certainly serve a purpose for farm to school connection, and those grants can be pretty substantial, at least to put in the greenhouse, like that one little section.
Right, yeah, this is, look, although there are some big ticket grants that I will throw this at, my strategy in pursuing projects like this is always the same. I throw everything I can at every program I can until somebody gives me the money. Right? So I'm gonna do big ones, I'm gonna do little ones. If I get the little one first, the little one's what we're gonna work with.
So you might cobble together a lot of small.
I expect that I'm gonna have to work it that way. I could get lucky and get the one big one that I have in the back of my head. Not impossible. But I can't bank on any one program over another.
Well, it ain't a bad project, $2,500.
That's true.
I have a question, Tara.
Yes?
I've just seen Fort Hill Farm come on, and if I understand their biodigester correctly, they should have some organic material. Are they all spreading it on the fields? Maybe we could have some of that or buy some of that. We're down at the, because they're making the methane and then they've got to get rid of this.
Yes, yes. This is Kai's Fort Hill Farms. Sorry, I went late, but yes, there is, we do have, solids, if anybody needs gardening, if that's what you're asking for the garden, we are
Even
more
more
than
than that.
welcome to.
Initially, what we're looking at is down along the French River, we're going to have to put a lot of organic material on that area to get it revitalized.
Yep,
And Wayne
definitely.
will tell you more about that, but he was talking about that earlier. When I saw your logo come on, I thought, wow, there's a match made on.
Yeah, we're willing to help with whatever. You just tell me what you need. And I know somebody had mentioned the farm to school grant. The school, Thompson Public Schools, did come up to the new barn and I gave them a tour and we talked about opportunities for the school on how agriculture can be more into Thompson Public Schools. So, which I thought was a great event. So.
Fantastic. So we're at about quarter of, and again, there's no hard stop here, but I feel like we've had a pretty good conversation, gotten some good input. Again, if anybody has things they want us to put on the maps to snapshot, let's do it before we go. Anybody have any closing thoughts, particularly Wayne and Grant as our guest consultants?
So keep thinking about this, keep looking at the plan. Any other feedback is very welcome. We will revise and update. And as I mentioned before, think of this as a creative endeavor for everybody. We've been doing this for a long time and we've had a lot of success with our planning, but the best success is when the client, which is all of us in general, gives us input and feedback. And as I mentioned before, nothing is completely written in stone, and we will amend the plan as we move along.
So for the next meeting, because we're doing these monthly, the fourth Wednesday, which is what we seem to have moved to instead of the first Wednesday, is the 28th of February. Since what we've discussed is looking at the next revision of this, I would suggest we do it here again so that we can be up on the screen. And I'll obviously send out an email to everybody who's been involved. But if we can loosely plan on that, I will ink that and you'll see all that tomorrow in a return email, and I'll send some kind of synopsis along with the recording link of what we discussed today so that people can share it, go back and listen to it, use it as a thought prompt, whatever. And always feel free to send any comments or questions at any time to me or call me or whatever. I love to talk about it. So I think you guys are all doing really great work. And thanks to Wayne and Grant for dialing in from Illinois tonight.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Hold on, Wayne, we've got one more question for you before you go.
Okay.
Charlie, somebody's asking a question here in the room. Let him.
I teach at a school in Dudley, and I'm kind of curious if those organics would be available from Fort Hill Farm for schools outside of the Thompson area.
Kais, did you hear that?
You want to check it because it's smelly.
The smellier the better.
Okay.
So what was the question? I could barely hear him.
We have a garden at our school in Dudley that we currently have, and we're going to be expanding it. And I'm kind of curious if you would make some of those organics available to our.
Of course. You just gotta let us know so that we can, have it ready. Right now, we are not saving any organic matter because, well, nobody needs it for their garden yet. So you just have to let us know.
Terrific. Thank you.
Great.
I can give, Tiara, I think has my cell phone number, or my email, or if you, however you want to get my phone number, just let me know and we can get you organic matter.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
I really appreciate that.
Thanks,
Not a
guys.
problem.
Grab pizza, grab cookies, grab soda, because I gotta take the rest of it home.
Can you include the notes that came on the chat list here in your report? Probably they're all addressed, but
Yeah, Charlie, I can do that when I download the Zoom recording. I can also download the chat history.
good, thanks.
Yep.
Good
Okay.
night, everybody.
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank
Everyone.
you.
Okay.